Gonna roll those dice tonight, all night.
Good morning, friends. Welcome back to another episode of GM Philosophy in the Morning. I'm the GM Philosopher, and today I'm going to basically give my official rating on which I believe is better, virtual D&D gaming or in-person tabletop gaming. I have a list of 20 different categories that I'm going to go through very briefly, and basically I'm going to award which one I think is better and have like a scoring system. And I'm going to use that to kind of talk about the differences between these two different types of TTRPG gaming. And I'm also going to obviously render one of them a winner based on which one wins more categories. Drop me a comment, let me know what you think, and also let me know if you agree or disagree with my outlook on these categories. With that being said, let's dive right in. First category on the list is gear and setup needs. Equipment required for each type of gaming, physical versus digital, dice, miniatures, maps, physical tools versus online platforms and software, etc. So just strictly speaking in terms of gear and setup needs, you really only need books, dice, and character sheets to play physically. In fact, you can even get away without the books if you want to be creative. When it comes to virtual, you do need something to interface with. A phone is kind of clunky. You can do it with a computer, much better. You're going to need an internet connection. Don't really need much more than that. You need some free software. You need an internet connection, obviously, but everyone already has that, right? I think when it comes to gear and setup needs, though, the winner is going to have to be tabletop gaming because you can get away with so little. You can get away with just dice and character sheets, to be really honest. And you could look up the very basic rules to D&D on your phone. There's like free version you can look up. But even with the books, all things considered, the gear and setup needs for D&D are relatively light, I feel, in comparison to needing a device to interface with the internet with. So anyway, I'm going to give that point to tabletop. Category number 2, tech requirements. Internet connection quality and device needs, platform reliability and familiarity with virtual tools. Okay, so the tech requirements for online gaming are obviously higher. If you don't know how to navigate a lot of like basic, like kind of common sense software type platforms, you're going to struggle with online gaming. Not that this can't be learned, but there is a learning curve to it. If someone's starting out and they've never played D&D at all, and we're looking at which one has the higher tech requirements, I have to go with tabletop being more friendly in this case. I think the learning curve is lower, cracking open a book, getting your character sheet, and just creating on the go. I do understand that D&D Beyond makes creating characters very, very simple, actually. It's actually simpler to do that than to use a book and like paper character sheet. However, when it comes time to jump into a gaming platform like Roll20 or Foundry, things do get more complicated, and that I think takes the complication level higher. So I have to give this point to tabletop. That makes tabletop 2, virtual 0. Category number 3 is ease of finding players. This is doubtlessly, the point here is going to go to virtual. It is so much easier to find virtual players for all kinds of reasons. Not only are there so many people online to play with, but you don't have to navigate the whole, where are we going to play? Can I invite these people over? Are they reputable people? If they turn out to be jerks, you can just disengage and block them. So yeah, no, it's so much easier to find players for virtual games than it is for in-person games. So virtual is definitely getting that point. All right, let's move on to category number 4, game preparation. Physical setup for in-person games, virtual tools for prep for things like Roll20, Foundry, or D&D Beyond. All right, here's the thing. I think that just prep time. We have a little bit of story prep. It's going to be the same for both because it doesn't really matter. The storyline prep, same for both. Where we're really going to have a difference here is in like maps and or like hex grid type stuff. It is, in my opinion, a lot more forgiving to prepare for in-person games, tabletop games, because you can use things like dry erase boards. Not that you don't have tools like that online and virtually, but in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, there is a whole nother level of complexity trying to get that to work, because when you're in person, you can throw down a dry erase board, draw your map, or you can print out maps, bring them, tape them together, whatever. Virtually, you can get maps. It's not that difficult to get hex grid maps, but you do have to get them ahead of time. And if you're going to do some kind of dry erase type thing on the virtual, there is a little bit of an extra layer of complication, I think, because drawing with a mouse is kind of gimmicky. And if you're going to use a pad, that's a whole nother piece of gear you need that you didn't even need for the tabletop part. Yeah, I'm going to have to say for game preparation, just the ease of game prep, I'm going to have to give that to tabletop, to in-person tabletop, because another thing is, you have to prepare things like tokens. You have to get the software all to link together. Whereas in person, I mean, you have to show up with your notes, show up with your hex grid, show up with your printed out maps if you're going to use them or whatever. But honestly, I have to say that for me, preparing for an in-person tabletop game is just less time intensive and more forgiving than preparing for a virtual game. To be honest, that's my 2 cents. So point goes to in-person tabletop. With that being said, I do want to take a minute and show you my featured product of the day. It is the Chessix Mega Mat. Speaking of dry erase boards, grids, this is a vinyl RPG Mega Mat. It's smooth, it's tough, it's made of tough vinyl, virtually indestructible. Mine's actually been cut, so it's a little smaller than the actual full-sized one is. You can order this on Amazon. It is 34.5 inches by 48 inches, reversible, 1-inch squares on one side. You can see I even have a drawing still on there. And hex on the other. Use wet erase markers on this to draw out your maps. You can easily erase them, roll this up, and then you can use it over and over again. I have been using my Chessix Mega Mat for years. I even cut it because I wanted to put it in a frame at one point, and I was just doing different stuff with it, just using it every single time I play D&D almost. Basically one of the most used pieces of gear I've ever used. I am a qualified Amazon affiliate, so guess what? If you do not have a Chessix Mega Mat in your gear collection, click on the link down in the description, go over to Amazon, order yourself the Chessix Mega Mat vinyl immediately, right now. Do it today. As a qualified affiliate, I earn a small commission when you click on links and then you purchase the stuff on Amazon at no additional cost to you. This helps me to support the channel, which is awesome. It also gets you an awesome Chessix Mega Mat. So do not delay. Grab your Mega Mat today. This is one of my favorite pieces of tabletop gear ever. Boom. If you're playing on tabletops, how are you even living? How are you even getting by without a Chessix Mega Mat? Seriously, go buy one. All right, now we're moving on to category number 5, role-playing immersion. All right, so for this one, I have to say this. I have experienced fantastic role-play immersion in both virtual and in-person tabletop settings. With that being said, I'm going to give the point here to in-person tabletop. Why? Because the immersion can be so much more real and visceral and deep when you're role-playing with people in person. There's something about being in the same room as people where the RP can just get so much deeper. Plus, I can play music and have it set at the perfect level. I can kind of control the ambiance. I could turn the lights down a little bit, whatever. I could light some incense. There are just so many more things I can do for immersion running in-person tabletop versus virtual. So in-person tabletop has to take that point. It is now 4-1 in favor of in-person tabletop. Let's move on to category number 6, safety and security. Okay, here's the thing. When it comes to in-person, you have to meet up physically in person. And no matter how you cut it, no matter how you shake it down, this is less safe than getting on and playing with people virtually. I understand that there can be, hacking situations. There can be doxing situations. There can be a lot of online safety concerns. There's also the factor that is harder to vet people that you meet online because you don't know them in person. With that being said, in my opinion, the level of safety and security you can experience playing virtually is way higher than playing in-person tabletop. Whether you're inviting people over to your house or you're meeting at the game store or you're going to someone else's house, your security level is just going to be lower for the simple fact that you're either going to have people in your home or you're going to have to leave your home. For that reason, that point goes to virtual. Virtual D&D is a lot more safer and it's a lot more secure than playing in person with people. That's going to take us to category number 7, interpersonal interaction quality. So this means physical presence, nonverbal cues, social bonding, delayed responses, audio quality, screen fatigue in virtual play, etc. So the interpersonal interaction quality, for reasons I've already kind of stated, is going to obviously go to in-person at tabletop. I have had some great experiences with this over virtual, but they just come nowhere near the experiences I've had in person. And that's not the fault of the virtual GMs or players I've played with. They've done a fantastic job. But the simple fact of the matter is when you're interfacing through a screen, this is not going to be as high in quality as when you're interacting with humans in person. So in-person D&D gets that point. By the way, do you struggle to come up with plot arcs on the fly? If so, I have the perfect tool for you. It is called My Ultimate Plot Randomizer. It is a free ebook. When you join my email list, you can download this for free. You'll get the link in your first email. It contains 4 D100 tables that will let you roll random plot arcs whenever you need them. Roll the hook, the conflict, and the conclusion, and even add wild and wacky stuff all right there. Download this, print it out, add it to your tool collection, and you will never go without another plot arc again. I give this away for free to help you create awesome plot arcs just like I do. I use this in almost every single session, and you are not going to want to miss out on this, so make sure you grab this. Next, we have accessibility. So this covers things like travel time, location-based barriers, physical limitations for in-person play, accessibility options and remote capabilities of virtual platforms, etc. So for general overall accessibility, I don't really feel like this is much of a debate. Virtual tabletop role-playing gets the point here over the in-person. First of all, in-person, like I said before, you're going to need to leave your house. That's going to make it way less accessible. I'm assuming most people have internet. If you don't have internet, that's obviously a huge, huge accessibility hurdle. You're not going to be able to game with people online if you don't have internet. With that being said, if you have internet, so I'm sort of I'm using that as like a foundational sort of principle here. Like we're assuming for the rate for my rating system game here that we're talking about people who do have access to internet. If you do have access to internet, it's just way more accessible to play virtual. You could literally join a game, jump in the game in one afternoon, boom, boom, boom. Getting a group like that together to meet at your house might take days, weeks, even months. So yeah, accessibility hands down goes to virtual gameplay. And this takes us to category number 9, cost differences. Okay, once again, right here, I have to give this point to, I'm going to have to give this point to the in-person tabletop. And let me tell you why. If we are going to assume that everyone has a device that's good for playing virtual D&D with, then virtual would actually win. But the cost of purchasing such a device is going to vastly outweigh the cost of purchasing the basic stuff needed to play D&D around the table with you and your friends and family. You can literally, buy a set of dice, print out a character sheet, and you can use your phone to access free stuff online. Yes, you can play D&D on your phone in a virtual tabletop, but it's going to be sort of clunky and it's not going to be quite as good. And you're going to do a lot better if you have like a computer or a laptop. We could assume that most people have those things. And if you do, then I would give the cost difference actually to virtual, because virtual is basically free once you have a device and internet to play on, unless you want to buy more stuff. But for the time being, just because I'm not going to assume everyone has a setup to play virtual D&D on very well, I'm going to give the cost difference points to in-person tabletop. So that's going to give in-person tabletop 6 points versus 3 points for virtual. Now let's discuss category 10, time management. Okay, scheduling challenges for in-person sessions falls under this category. Flexibility of remote sessions, but the potential for more distractions. So for time management, here is what I will say. I think that virtual D&D is going to take this point. And let me tell you why. It's a lot easier to control your own time management when you are not like at someone's house or at the game store, or when you have people over at your house. It's way easier to just log off your computer when you need to and then go about your business than trying to navigate like actually leaving a physical get together. Then there's the drive home. If there are people at your house, then they may kind of dilly-dally and talk and hang out and stuff, which is awesome if that's what you want. But I have to say that if time management down to the minute is of the essence and your time is what you're concerned about and you want to make sure that you have full control of your time management, then virtual is by far going to be a better way to go with that. And this takes us to category number 11, customization options. So this covers things like handcrafted physical elements like 3D terrain and props, digital customizations like dynamic maps, tokens, and automated tools, etc. All right, so here's the thing. You can do pretty awesome customized things in both realms. I've seen people do awesome, awesome 3D mini type environments, battle maps with awesome terrain, right? You can have the miniatures, you can do all these kinds of things. But here's the thing. As far as customization options go, taking into account the amount of work it takes to customize a gaming environment and the amount of money it takes, you know what? This might surprise some of you, but I'm going to give this point to a virtual tabletop, to virtual gaming. And here's why. Because it's a lot easier to completely customize everything virtually. You can get an image of an awesome battle map, put it down there. That's going to take a fraction of the time it would take to build an actual 3D like terrain in a in-person physical tabletop setting. Not that it's less cooler. In fact, I'd rather play with an interactive 3D in-person tabletop setting, like where they build the map and it's literally like a bridge or a building and you move your minis around. Like that is so much fun. But let's just be honest, while the piece by piece is maybe cooler in person, you could create 100 customized options for the amount of time it takes you to build one in a physical setting. So you're going to have, though the quality might be slightly lower in terms of like immersion of the game and stuff you're actually getting to play with, you're going to have so many more options in the virtual realm. And the category is literally customization options. So as far as customization options go, I'm going to give that point to virtual D&D. Next category, 12, disruptions and challenges. So this covers things like physical interruptions like phone calls, pets, kids, etc. For in-person games, to technical issues like internet outages, software glitches, etc. for virtual games. Okay. So disruptions and challenges, you know what? Here's the thing. I have a lot of pets. I have a big family. There's a lot going on at my house all the time. It is true that there's a lot of potential for disruptions and challenges in my in-person games. I have to go to great lengths to kind of like try to get ahead of those things and keep them from happening. There can absolutely be disruptions to virtual games. I've experienced glitches. I've experienced, brief internet issues. I've experienced, minor hiccups that cause me to have to close out of, the platform and log back in. But I really have to say that I know I experience more disruptions when playing in-person games than I do when playing virtual games. And you know what? This is going to surprise me, but I'm going to give that point to virtual gaming. I think I experience fewer disruptions and challenges when playing virtually, actually, to be super honest. This takes us to category 13, social atmosphere. This covers things like casual chatting, table camaraderie, food sharing, text channels, side chats during virtual play, etc. So for social atmosphere, hands down, I've got to give this point to in-person tabletop. I love socializing both virtually and in person, but I would say the quality of the socialization is so much higher in person than online. And nothing against the people I'm socializing with. It's not about the people, really. What I'm talking about is the level of intimacy you can achieve. If I'm standing in the same room with someone and having a conversation with them, that's just more engaging than having a conversation over, like, through a screen to someone else in the virtual realm. So for that reason, social atmosphere is going to go to physical, in-person D&D gaming around the table. This takes us to category 14, game pacing. This covers things like tendency for more organic, immediate decision making in person, slower pacing due to tech lag or multitasking in virtual games. This one also has to go to in-person tabletop roleplay, physical tabletop roleplay, where everyone's in the same room. And the reason for this is because there are these awkward moments in virtual games where like people don't want to talk over each other because it's harder to understand people. The GM kind of has to give it a second before they start something. Other players kind of give it a second before they chime in. And if people do talk over each other, there's very little value that can happen. Whereas in person, it can be a lot more snappy. It can be a lot more immediate. People can even talk at the same time and still accomplish things. So for that reason, I have to give the point for game pacing and just the feel of the game and the punchiness of it. We're going to give that to physical in-person gaming. Next, we're going to cover category 15, visual and audio experience. This includes things like for the physical D&D theater of the mind or physical maps and miniatures in person versus for virtual maps, dynamic lighting, soundboards online, etc. So the visual and audio experience. One thing virtual does really well is the dynamic lighting, only showing your character what they can see based on the lighting that your character has available. This is surprisingly difficult to pull off physically, really, really easy to do in virtual, so I like this. The audio experience in virtual is actually wonky. You would think that it'd be good, but it's surprisingly difficult to get everyone's music levels correct. And they can kind of control it themselves, but if they turn it down, it might turn down the voices too and whatnot. So it's kind of surprisingly difficult to get that to work right in a lot of cases, in my opinion. And also, I have found that I've had so much more just in-depth experiences where I've had theater of the mind paired with the camaraderie of the table and the music and even the smells of things like incense, lighting candles, maybe things like this. I have to say that I have to rate my visual and audio experiences as better in person than I have experienced in virtual. Virtual has a lot of potential, and there are some things it does really, really well. But until virtual actually gets to the point where it's more like a visual video game or a movie, as opposed to, just moving tokens and looking like a visual game board, which is not a bad thing because it is D&D. But I just have to say that I get better visual and audio experiences in person around a physical game table. So that point is going to go to in person. This takes us to category 16, session longevity. Okay. This covers things like longer in-person sessions due to fewer logistical interruptions, or shorter online sessions due to screen fatigue or attention span, etc. So here's the thing. Session longevity, this is very close to being a tie, because I don't know that I would say I wouldn't say that I have any particular qualms with session longevity in either case. I will say this. When I'm playing in person, I generally expect longer sessions, and I think that longer sessions are more fun in person. I would say that when it comes to virtual gaming, I am way more likely to want to stick to strict. Like if we're going to game for 3 hours or 4 hours, whatever, I'm going to be way more likely to want to stay strict on that. Whereas in person, if it goes over an extra hour or an extra hour and a half or 2 hours even, I'm like, whatever, it doesn't really matter. But part of that is also because I do a lot of prep work in my life to prepare for in-person sessions, basically giving myself the whole evening to do it. Whereas with virtual stuff, a lot of times it falls on nights like I schedule it in by the hour into my schedule. So I kind of have a punch in and a punch out time where I know there is somewhere I have to be 5 minutes after the scheduled end time of the game. So I have to cut it off at that point. And if I don't, it can kind of like muddle my schedule. But part of that is because I do not do the prep work to free up my whole night like I do with in-person gaming. With that being said, when it comes to session longevity, just for my own comfort, for my own way that I like to do things, just for my experiences, I have to say that I'm going to give that point to in-person physical tabletop role play. And the reason for that is because I just feel better about session longevity in those sessions that I do on virtual. That could be something that I could definitely see different people having different ideas about. Drop me a comment, let you know about that. I think that this is more personal for me and less indicative of pluses or minuses to virtual gaming itself. Like I think this is more of a personal thing for me. But anyway, that's where I'm going to give the point. Cry about it if you don't like it. Leave me a comment. Let me know I'm wrong. All right, moving on to category 17, group size. So here's the thing. I could totally see that having a bigger group in a virtual tabletop space could get way more chaotic and result in far less screen time for each player. So I'm going to have to give this point to physical tabletop, because like physical in-person tabletop. And the reason for this is because I have played a lot of like 13, 14 player D&D. Group size is so much less a restrictive factor in person for me than it is in virtual. In virtual, if I'm getting more than like 5 players or 6 players, I'm really like thinking, not everyone is getting enough playtime. I mean, I can't even imagine having 13 players in virtual space, because it would just feel like most people are just sitting around not doing anything most of the time, partly because the talking overlap. Only one person talking at a time in virtual, which I think is optimal. you get so much less accomplished than you can in person, because you could have 2-3 people all saying things, role playing at the same time, etc., and things go way faster. So yeah, group size, I have to give that point to physical in-person gaming. With that being said, it's time to take a real quick break and let you know about my published product of the episode, the Ultimate Dungeon Loot Randomizer. I wrote this book. It contains 10 D100 tables full of awesome dungeon loot. Let me just show you a little bit of this. If you are tired of giving players the same old loot session after session, this is the book for you. This contains tables of mundane dungeon items, slightly magical dungeon items, magical weapons and armor, mundane weapons and armor, individual pieces of treasure, 100 different magic scrolls, a whole D100 table of magic potions and elixirs, a whole D100 table of cursed items you've never seen or run in your games before, forgotten wonders and otherworldly relics, and even full chests of treasure and loot, not only giving you the option to roll on other tables to make up whole chests, but you even get the aesthetics of the chests. This book comes in an awesome hardcover version, a softcover version, and a very affordable ebook version. Grab the version that's right for you and run some loot that your players will never see coming. Do you sometimes get tired of running the same old loot in your games, game after game, session after session? Well, hey, throw some stuff at your players that they will never see coming. Inject a new sense of creativity into your games. And hey, guess what? This book is system agnostic. You can use it with any fantasy TTRPG system. The abilities of all the magic items are right in the book. Just translate them in a stat block or whatever you need to do for the system you're playing, and boom, you can even scale it for power level, make the items work perfect for your group in your game. You can order this on my Blurb bookstore. Links is in the description. All 3 versions come in very affordable options, price points. Buy the one that's right for you. If you're playing virtual, that's probably the ebook, because then you can screen grab the stuff and put it right on the screen. If you're playing physical, probably the hardcover or the softcover. Personally, the softcover is my favorite because it's so pretty and it looks kind of like a premium comic book. Grab the Ultimate Dungeon Loot Randomizer today and revolutionize your loot from the ground up. Plus, every purchase goes to support the channel, which I appreciate. Thank you so much. All right, we are down to the final 3 categories. The next one is learning curve. Which one is easier for newcomers to jump into games without barriers? Which one requires more onboarding? Okay, so this is actually kind of a tough one because it's so easy to create your first character using like D&D Beyond. But at the same time, learning to jump into the platforms that facilitate role play, like Roll20 or Foundry or whatever it is you're using, the learning curve is relatively steep here, but it's a tech learning curve. So for tech-minded people, this might not be such a barrier, whereas people who are sort of like non-tech savvy like me, this can be actually a bigger learning curve. Personally, I feel like the virtual has a higher learning curve in almost every way, with the exception of actually getting into the character creation and creating your character, choosing spells, etc. D&D Beyond makes it so easy to create your character. It's just so easy. It's so much easier than using the book and physical like paper character sheet. And for this reason, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm going to give this category to the virtual because I actually think it might technically be more intro user friendly. I really think it might be. This is not necessarily true for the GM. The GM has a whole additional learning curve for learning how to run the platforms that they're going to run games on, like Foundry or Roll20. With that being said, in an overarching sense, I kind of have to give this one to the virtual. And that takes us to category 19, rules management. So here's the thing. I think that this is very close to being a draw. I'm not going to make it a draw. And let me describe what I mean by this for a minute. Rules management really comes from the GM. And there are a lot of tools, both in person and virtually, that give the GM the things they need for rule arbitration. Things like the shape of a cone, or the shape of the area of a cube, or the distance from one point to another. These things are relatively easy to get, as are the descriptions of spells and abilities in both environments. There's something to be said for the fact that if you're using D&D Beyond, for your character sheet, you can quickly access any of your abilities just by clicking on them. With that being said, you can also look them up in the book. But personally, I'm going to give rules management overall to virtual tabletop gaming, because I just think that virtual gives you slightly more tools. I think that being able to click on the abilities and just bring them up is easy. And this is assuming you're using D&D Beyond, which why wouldn't you if you're playing D&D? And most of the platforms, like Roll20, if you're using Roll20, they give you shapes for everything you need, like the cube and the cone, and they give you measuring tools. And yeah, you can have all that stuff in person, but sometimes, unless you buy additional things, it's a little more difficult to track. Also, you can track things like, who is prone, who is stunned, a little bit easier, because you can just put the little condition things on the tokens, whereas you need to use physical, or keep track of them physically in person on the table, which is fine. But I just think that rules management might be easier virtually, so I'm going to give virtual the point for that one. And then we're going to finally come to our last point, which is the feel of the game. Okay, the overall feel of the game. Some things that might fall under this category could be in physical tabletop: the tangibility of rolling dice, flipping through the books, moving your minis, versus on virtual, efficiency and visual flair of digital tools, right? But the potential for detachment. I have to give this point to in-person tabletop. And the reason that I am giving this point to the in-person tabletop is simply for this. To me, everyone's sitting around the table, rolling dice in their dice towers, standing up and putting your minis on the board when the combat happens, people having their character sheets and looking at them and writing things down on your sheet, rolling your dice, sitting behind the GM screen, being able to adjust my music to the perfect volume for the people in the room, being able to control the ambiance, being able to interact with people physically. There's really no substitute for this. To be honest, the feel of the game is going to go to the in-person, physical, around the table game, as opposed to the virtual. The in-person tabletop is going to get that point. And that, my friends, is going to be a wrap. Thank you so much for coming back for another episode of GM Philosophy in the Morning. I'm here every single day creating videos about the best game in the world, D&D. Leave me a comment. Let me know what you think. Do you agree or disagree with my points? Obviously, in-person tabletop 1, 12 to 8. Do you agree with this or do you disagree with this? I would love to know your thoughts. Drop me a comment. Let me know. And as always, thank you so much for watching another one of my videos. I will see you awesome people on the next one.